there will be 10 minutes Q&A and followed by just a 5-minute closing remarks. So this is basically the lineup of the today's webinar. And we have with us all of them, who are the speakers are already online. I'm looking for RIS DG to come online to deliver his welcome remarks. If there is some technical issue, he is here. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I'm
Good
extremely
morning.
sorry due to some technical glitch. I'm not able to join. So
No, no,
sorry,
that's
extremely
fine.
sorry.
That's just fine. We are just discussing about the lineup of the program. I have given a very brief outline of the webinar. So the Director General RIS, Professor Sachin Kumar Sharma, he is joined. So, and then from Riyati, Professor Kyoji is also already here. So may I now request the DG RIS to give his inaugural remarks, please.
Uh, Thank you, Professor Pravide. And first of all, I'm extremely sorry for a bit delay due to some technical glitch from my end. Uh, Good morning to all my colleagues who joined from India, as well as good afternoon to our friends joining from Japan. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome Professor Fukao, Dr. Kawasaki, Professor Tudo, Professor Ureta, and all distinguished speakers and participants for today's webinar. Today's discussion is particularly timely for us as we just returned from a 3-day visit to Japan only yesterday. Over these 3 days, I had the opportunity to engage with several leading Japanese institutions and scholars on strengthening India-Japan cooperation. I also had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Kawasaki at the roundtable discussion at the Embassy of India on 7th July. I am delighted that we meet again today, this time virtually. Dear colleagues, for me today webinar is not an isolated event. It is a very much a continuation of the conversation we have having in Tokyo over the last 3 days. The timing could hardly be more appropriate. The recent visit of Japanese Prime Minister to India has given fresh momentum to the India-Japan Spatial Strategic and Global Partnership. The outcome on economic security, artificial intelligence, and energy resilience tell us something important. India-Japan cooperation is increasingly moving towards the strategic sector that will shape the global economy of tomorrow. Therefore, the question before us no longer simply how can India and Japan trade more and cooperate more, but how can India and Japan work together to build resilient, trusted, and competitive ecosystem in an increasingly uncertain world? Dear colleagues, the vocabulary of globalization itself is changing from efficiency to resilience, from just in time to just in case, and increasingly from the cheapest supplier to the most trusted partner. But here I would also add a word of caution. Resilience should not become another form of protectionism. Having spent many years negotiating at the WTO, I have seen how difficult it is to build consensus, but also how important it is to preserve an open, predictable, and rule based trading system, particularly for developing countries and countries who believe in the rule based trading system. The real challenge before policymakers today is therefore to find the right balance between openness and resilience, efficiency and security, and national priorities and global cooperation. So, in this context, why Japan and India cooperation is unique. Japan brings technological capabilities, capital manufacturing excellence, and decades of experience in building sophisticated production network. India brings scale, a young and skilled population, expanding technological capability, a, a rapidly growing market, and the ambition of becoming a developed economy by 2047. The opportunity, therefore, is not simply to relocate existing supply chain from one geography to another. It is to jointly build the next generation of supply chain, semiconductor, critical minerals, clean energy, advancing manufacturing, digital infrastructure, and resilient logistics can become important pillar of cooperation. India's Act East policy, Mahasagar vision, and Japan's vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific provides a strong strategic foundation for taking this partnership forward. Our recent engagement in Japan have further strengthened RIS institutional partnership and reaffirmed our objective to move from conversation to collaboration. Our long-standing partnership with RETI reflects the importance we attach to sustain knowledge to knowledge cooperation in strengthening India Japan relation. As we approach the 75th anniversary of India Japan diplomatic relationship in 2027, RIS look forward to working closely with Reti and other colleagues to develop a forward looking agenda for deeper cooperation. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. And once again, I welcome all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A very, very insightful speech, opening remarks, and also setting the tone of the today's discussion. Um, I thank RISDG for taking the delegation to Tokyo and very, very positive outcomes. And also, today in his statement, he said, which I'm sure we are going to discuss more on it, the resiliency should not behave another form of protectionism. Very important word. So, of course, we will be talking more in it on this in today's webinar. Thank you very much. With further ado, may I now invite Professor Kyoji Fukao. He is the chairman of RIETI and also the university professor at the Institute of Economic Research, Hitatsubishi University. Over to you, Chairman, sir.
Thank you, Professor Day. So, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this joint webinar today, hosted by DAT and the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, titled India-Japan Cooperation Amidst Global Uncertainties and Realignment of Supply Chains. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to say a few words. It is a great honor to be hosting a webinar with RIS, which is widely recognized for its outstanding work in advancing policy dialogue and for fostering cooperation in the global south. This webinar was planned and organized with the cooperation of Professor Shujiro Urata, Senior Advisor of RIETI and Professor Emeritus of Waseda University, and Professor Prabir De of RIS. We extend our sincere gratitude to both professors for their dedicated efforts in making this event possible. In today's rapidly changing, uncertain, and complex international geopolitical economic environment, India Pacific countries, which are highly dependent on trade and investment, are facing increasingly complex policy choices to ensure continued development and prosperity. This webinar will examine how Japan and India are responding to such global uncertainties and the realignment of supply chains. It will also explore how our two countries can navigate global challenges and cooperate to strengthen supply chains. From Rieti, Program Director, Faculty Fellow Yasuyuki Todo, and Consulting Fellow Kenichi Kawasaki will also join today's webinar. I am confident that today's discussions will provide many insights based on the various perspectives of the presenters. I'd like to once again express my gratitude to everyone who has taken the time to speak at the event and to all the participants. This concludes my remark. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kyoji. Thank you very much for your opening remarks. And we also like to thank the Rieti team who also worked, hand in hand with us in making this event possible, particularly Akiko Kumagai-san and Professor Urata and everyone. So thank you very much for your acknowledgement of RIS team, RIS DG, and our people who worked with Rieti in making this possible. Thank you. So now we move to our panel one, which is on global uncertainties and realignment of supply chain. Just two housekeeping announcements. Those who are attending as the speakers and also the participants, in your screen there is a common call which you can chat. So you can use the chat box to place your questions during the question and answer sessions. This is a if you'd like to have any questions, so we'll be coming back to you. The chairman in particular of the session will coming back to you to answer to your questions through our speakers. This is one. Second is kindly mute your mic when you are not speaking. We have a good number of participants today as of now, and we look forward to have the panel discussions henceforth. May I now invite Dr. Kenichi Kawasaki to chair the panel one. Over to you, Professor Kawasaki.
Yes, thank you. So thanks again for two useful introductory remarks. So let me start panel one on global uncertainties and the alignment of supply chains. I'm Ken Kawasaki, a concerned fellow at Rieti since its establishment over 25 years. So let me firstly say that we have seen emergent uncertainties in world economy and trade after COVID-19 pandemic caused by Russia's military invasion of Ukraine, US tariff hikes once again, and others. In the meantime, we have seen steady progress made in trade and investment liberalization and facilitation through regional FTAs and EPAs under WTO multilateral free trade system. As you know quite well, after the US withdrew from TPP in 2017, CPTPP entered into force in 2018, and the UK joined in 2024. RCEP also entered into force in 2022, though India withdrew from that. Please allow me to speak a bit technical issues, but I have been very much concerned about trade diversion effects of international trade policy making through change in global supply chains. First, I have argued possible benefits of US tariff hikes on third economies. According to my study on the impact of US reciprocal tariff by economic model simulations, Japan's real GDP was estimated to increase by 0.4%, as a 1.0% decrease by US additional tariffs on Japan bilaterally would be more than offset by US additional tariff hike on China by 0.6%, on Canada by 0.6% again, and on Mexico by 0.3%. So the impact of US tariff hikes on other economies would largely be dependent on multilateral relations among the economy rather than bilateral relations with the US alone. On the other hand, to be frank, I have worried about trade diversion effects of India return to RCEP and join CPTPP on member parties, including Japan, alongside third economies. member economies of regional trade agreements (RTAs) would enjoy positive trade creation effects with newly joined economies, but that would be offset by adverse trade diversion effects to some extent due to overlapping of RTAs already concluded and implemented. According to my another estimate, if India returned to RCEP, India's real GDP would increase by 3.1%, but Japan's real GDP would decrease by 0.1%, as India trade more with China and Japan trade with India and China would be replaced. If India joined CPTPP, real GDP would increase in India by 1.6%, but decrease in Japan by 0.1%, as Japan and India have already implemented bilateral EPA. So India has appeared to me to be very kind, not joining RCEP and not joining CPTPP, helping Japan to avoid those adverse impacts. So all that said, it would be quite useful on this occasion to consider possible cooperation between Japan and India under rising uncertainties which have affected global supply and value chains. So I'd like to hear specific policy proposal based on evidence of economic analysis from two distinguished speakers of India and Japan for 10 minutes each, followed by discussion in a collective manner for 10 minutes. As it is already introduced, the first speaker is Professor Durairaji Kumarasamy of MRIRS, and the second speaker is Professor Yasuyuki Todo of Waseda University. So, Professor Kumarasamy, could you start within 10 minutes?
Thank you, Professor Kenichi Kawasaki. Respected. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you and see you clearly.
Yeah, thank you. So, respected Professor Sachin Kumar Sharma, Director General of RIS, and Professor Kyoji Fukao, Chairman of RIETI, and Professor Emeritus of Itoboshi University. It is my honor to be part of this panel discussion. I'm deeply grateful to Professor Prabidi for inviting me in this timely webinar on India-Japan cooperation, given the global uncertainties to explore the realignment of supply chain. And it is already our chair pointed out the adverse impact of how India exit from RCEP and not part of certain multilateral aspects, which has a huge impact on the trade, and also proposing for a joint initiative in order to address this supply chain disruptions. So to give a brief context, India and Japan has a long-standing strategic partnership. Of course, it is already given by the respected dignitaries. I'm not going into detail, but particularly where economic engagement in terms of trade, service, and investment through CEPA have been a great support to build advanced mobility, next-gen technology. And both India and Japan hold more than 70 institutional bilateral dialogue mechanisms that covering technological development to defense and maritime security. So which also shows how deeply it is integrated, where the figure shows how the geopolitical risk index spanning from 2000 onwards, with recent trends in global uncertainties. Relatively since 2018, the world has experienced higher geopolitical risk, wherein it moved away from efficiency-driven globalization with effective acceleration on global chain integration to seeking for a supply chain resilience post 2018, where the realignment strategies, exploring the realignment strategies, and so on. So this shows that the earlier idea of globalization, which has fundamentally changed with the gradual losing the strength of multilateralism and unrest, global tension, both in terms of economic, political, and security aspects as well. For instance, prior to 2018, how we idealized the popular ideation of a global value chain through production fragmentation, enabling to achieve low production costs, minimizing efficiency, just-in-time manufacturing with the deep supply chain linkages, particularly with China. All shown efficiency-driven globalization via both regional, including Southeast Asia and South Asia level, and also global value chain integration, which moved from post 2018, where we are more concerned about economic security, strategic autonomy, self-sustenance, and supply chain resilience through reliable economic partnership for nearshoring in order to achieve sustainable and diversified supply chains. For instance, since 2018, the rising geopolitical tension, technological competition, climate change together create
sorry to
multifold.
bother, sorry to interrupt you. You have any PowerPoint?
Oh, I haven't shared it. Okay, sorry, sir. I thought I
No,
shared it.
no, 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 no,
Just,
no.
I'm sharing it. I'm sharing right away, sir. Is it visible, sir?
It is visible.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought I already shared it. Okay. So, for instance, since 2018, rising global tension, geopolitical tension, technological competition, and climate change together create manifold disruptions to supply chain. In addition to that, the both countries import a large share of oil, gas, and critical fuel inputs, which also create energy security concerns, and not just geopolitical shocks, but also the climate change as well. In terms of extreme weather events, increasingly disrupts ports, logistics, corridors, and distorts the manufacturing process as well. So to deal with this, we need a shared challenge. Both Japan and India face a shared challenges that require a coordinated effort, deep mutual understanding, and institutionalized trust building. If you look into the trade, bilateral trade, particularly between India and Japan, it is about 27.7 billion US dollar, wherein Japan exports around 21 billion US dollar and imports about 6 billion US dollar, shows a clear asymmetry in a bilateral trade. However, the main source of benefits comes from Japanese investment to India, where Japan is India's fifth largest FDI source with a cumulative investment of nearly 48 billion US dollar, and there is setting a target to reach about roughly 70 million US dollar in 10 years down the line. So despite there is about more than 4,000 products are being traded by India to Japan, however, the concentration lies on a few products, which again shows a huge scope for the trade expansion, investment acceleration between the countries. And the major products that are traded, if you see here briefly on chemicals, machinery and electronics, metal transportation, textile and clothing, and so on, which again indicates from the Japan side, we're getting technology and capital, and in terms of from India side, assessing the materials and market kind of relationship that we can see very briefly. And this also shows there is a huge trade, investment, and value chain integration in order to achieve. Both India and Japan have to jointly address the global uncertainties. And what does this mean concretely for India-Japan trade? Where the China controls over 85% of global rare earth processing. That shared choke points for both electronics and EV sector. And Japan in particular is almost entirely import dependent on rare earths. Our pharmaceutical supply chain as well remain reliant on handful of source countries for APIs. And besides the price manipulation, non-market policies and practices, which are seeing very recently, distorts input costs for strategic industries for both the countries. In addition, in terms of techno-nationalism, where the export controls on semiconductors and AI computes are fragmenting global innovation network as well. So these uncertainties complicates long-term investment planning, even for Japanese manufacturing, evaluating to consider India as an alternate base for investing in India. So again, so this the table also captures the synergy where both India and Japan to come of the crucial to engage in the crucial sectors for cooperation, where the complementary is quite striking. For example, in semiconductors, Japan brings design and fab ecosystem, where India brings materials and capital. In terms of critical minerals, Japan brings rare earths and battery inputs, and India can bring resource endowment, refining capacity under schemes like NCMM, etc. And in advanced manufacturing, Japanese precision meets India scale under production-linked incentive schemes. Already, some of the critical sector, specific sector where Japanese firms are getting benefit from that. And in terms of green technologies, Japan's hydrogen and battery technology meets India's renewable capacity. And in terms of logistics, Japanese infrastructure financing can support India's Sagarmala vision and geopolitical position in terms of the Indo-Pacific. So, and even in the series of the recent 16th summit, which happened last week, where you can see a joint declaration of economic security and on AI cooperation statement, memorandum of cooperation on batteries, pharmaceutical, mineral exploration, next generation mobility. So the list is very extensive. In a nutshell, what it significantly shows that both countries signed this joint declaration on economic security cooperation, where they're committing to engage in project-based collaboration across key 5 strategic sectors. This already briefed here and again extensively discussed on semiconductor, critical minerals, ICT, clean energy, pharmaceutical sectors, and so on. If we trace this timeline, and again, it's very strategically, we are moving from SIPA in 2000 to the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor Initiative vision in 2017, then Supply Chain Resilient Initiative in 2021, then Semiconductor MOU in 2023. So right with the recent declaration also, there is a clear trajectory of deepening sector-specific institutionalization. Then why does this each side needs the other? In case of India's Viksit Bharat 2047 vision, Japan provide capital, quality infrastructure like Mumbai, Ahmedabad, bullet train, technology transfer in semiconductors and precision manufacturing. And importantly, Japan remains the largest bilateral ODA donor in most of the significant infrastructure, quality infrastructure, particularly in India across various states as well. On the other hand, Japan's growing growth strategy, emphasizing on 17 priority sector, depends heavily on India. So Japan faces a shrinking, of course, aging workforce, where India offers a young population, including both market and the workforce as well. And notably, Japanese FDI into India has also surpassed FDI into China last 2 years. So this also indicates that there is a China plus one diversification in action, where FDI investment flows in India is also gradually increasing. So this mutual need has crystallized to joint vision for the next decade in terms of economic security, advanced mobility, and so on. And the concrete steps are also already underway that we can also see in various initiatives that has been taken place. But here, something that I find genuinely interesting is that India's One District, One Product initiative is directly inspired by Japan's own One Village, One Product movement. It is a rare instance of policy transfer from Japan to India, where ODOP now covers about 1,100 products across the 760 districts, emphasizing more on identifying the key products from each district, not only the food processing industry, but also identify certain industries which can enable value chain participation. So where Japan is already an pioneer in that, maybe some level of support through the ODA initiatives or policy inputs that can given to strengthen the supply chain from the grassroots, so that in order to ensure the supply chain resilience and also enable diversifying India's export beyond the handful of very few segments. And in addition to that, this I think ASEAN Africa Growth Corridor is also deserve more attention here, which was launched in 2017, and there is also a report by RIS Area and IDE JETRO jointly submitted, which is a sea corridor linking India ports like Mumbai, Kolkata to African ports like Djibouti, Mombasa. So it again rests on a key pillar, which again have a huge scope for looking for a supply chain realignment. For example, why Africa? Because Africa offers exactly what can diversify India and supply chain further in terms of critical minerals, extraction of resources, young workforce to complement our own demographic dividend, and there is a huge market under Africa CFTA of 1.4 million as well. So there is a scope of enabling multimodal connectivity through sea corridors plus rail plus road lane to convert these resource access into the actual resilient trade flows, where the JETRO in India already, India's Exim Bank are already a workhorse making this happen, where JETRO posted several initiatives on Japan-India SME Forum in Tokyo and co-developed the this Asia-African Growth Corridor as well. So this can extend India, even in case of Exim Bank as well. They can also extend the lines of credit to African partner countries and support Indian exporters entering Japan-linked value chains there. So together, there are natural institutional pairing for scaling trilateral India-Japan-Africa financing going forward. So these are the key takeaways. I don't want to take much time. So which is already highlighted, this India and Japan have a natural hedge against the global uncertainties. In terms of complementarity, both India's Viksit Bharat and Japan Security 5.0 visions, which they can also reinforce. And there is also scope for a shift focus from traditional infrastructure financing towards funding critical sector resilience in terms of semiconductor, mineral, and green technology. And they also have to think beyond the bilateralism, which already briefed on the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, that initiatives that I think. I remember that there was a consistent discussion on that, but I did not see recently any development on that, to my knowledge. And there is also localized to globalized. So that means, there is a huge scope from local manufacturing strength into international value chain rather than relying solely on large scale centralized production. So with this, I thank.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kumarasamy. So please allow me to invite second speaker directly in consideration of time limits here. We are already 5 minutes behind the schedule. So Professor Todo, could you start your presentation within
Thank you
10
very
minutes
much.
maximum?
So can you see my slide?
Yes, I can see your slide.
Okay, so
Yeah, we can see it.
Please,
Yeah.
and you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so once again, my name is Yasugi Todo from Waseda University in Rieti. It is my greatest honor to be invited to this great seminar because India-Japan cooperation has become more and more important. So let me start with this figure, which shows. So basically, the left figure shows the share of China in imports of intermediate products, and for India and Japan, the share of China is now 25%, 30%, which is quite high. The right figure shows the imports of automobile parts to Japan, and China's share has been increasing to 45% already, which is extremely high. And because of that, we are truly relying on China in supply chains, which leads to a vulnerable supply chain. And according to my simulation, using 1 million Japanese companies and their 4 million supply chain ties, we found that if imports from China would reduce by 80% for 2 months, then 40% of Japan's value-added production would be lost, which is a huge effect because the effect of import disruption can be magnified through domestic supply chains. So we need to diversify supply chains to other countries for economic resilience. However, Japan's supply chains to the global south, including India, is not have not been expanding yet. So the left figure shows the share of each country in Japan's imports of intermediate products, and China's share is kind of stagnant, but ASEAN's share is also stagnant, and India's share is quite low and very stagnant. The right figure is showing Japan's foreign direct investment outflows And you can see FDI to US is increasing, but the FDI to ASEAN is stagnant. And FDI to India is actually increasing, but still the amount is much smaller than FDI to ASEAN. And the good news is that according to JETRO survey, 39% of large firms, large Japanese firms, are willing to invest in India in the future. However, bad news is that only 14% of SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, are willing to invest in India. So there should be several barriers to Japan's expansion of supply chains to the global south, including India. And one is a lack of information of markets and possible partner companies. So the government should collect and disseminate such information to the private sector, utilizing public institutions like JETRO, JBIG, and JICA. And here I want to emphasize three recent advancements. One is the government has set up a Japan-India Economic Office recently. And regarding the risk information, the Japanese government is going to establish this economic security think tank actually in Ueti. And also last week, associated with the summit, Japan-India Joint Economic Forum was held, and many companies from both countries participated for information sharing and for search for possible partners. So these channels, these policies are quite effective. So these channels should be expanded. And another barrier is competition with China. China's Belt and Road Initiative has strengthened economic and political ties between China and the global south, while reducing ties with Japan, as shown by these figures taken from my studies. Of course, India is not participating in the BRI, but still, overall, in general, Japan is reducing ties with the global south. So Japan needs to effectively utilize ODA and other official finance um, for this purpose. In particular, infrastructure development associated with the technical assistance through Tide 8 can be quite effective. Good examples are Mumbai Ahmedabad high speed rail and Bengaluru metro. And one of my studies actually found that Japan's ODA can promote Japan's FDI to the recipient country. So through ODA, Japan and India can benefit from each other and create a win-win situation. And the third barrier is Western countries' strict environmental regulations. Like EU's CBAM and EU deforestation regulations. So this leads to kind of a shrink in between the global south and the Western countries, while increasing ties with China. And in addition, recently the Hormuz crisis has highlighted the importance of energy security, particularly to the global south, where which actually heavily depend on fossil fuel. So we need a gradual progress rather than rapid progress towards zero emission. And in this regard, Japan can be a bridge between the West and the global South. And actually, AZEC, as Asia Zero Emission Community, has taken this approach, multi-path approach. And so in this regard, actually, Japan's advanced technologies, such as hybrid cars, energy-saving technologies, and high-efficiency coal-fired power generation can be utilized as transition technologies. However, like ODA to Barauni supercritical thermal power station in India has been suspended because of environmental concerns. So I believe that these strict environmental regulations should be alleviated for the time being. So in that sense, updated POIP, free and open Indo-Pacific, can incorporate such a gradual approach. So finally, I would like to emphasize that we have to go beyond the supply chain and expand knowledge networks. So because international research collaboration can enhance innovation, as this figure taken from my study shows, actually the international research collaboration can improve the quality of innovation more than the domestic collaboration. Because through international collaboration, we can learn foreign advanced technologies which is not available domestically. However, Japan is inactive in international research collaboration, as shown by this figure. India is actually doing very good. And recently, knowledge networks with the Global South, in particular with India, has become and will be more and more important. So these figures are showing international research collaboration networks on the COVID research. And actually, India is among the top 5 countries in terms of the number of academic papers on COVID. And India has been collaborating with actively with the US, the UK, China, and even Thailand. However, Japan is not a top 5 country or top 5 partners of the top 5 countries. So we need to strengthen international research collaboration between India and Japan, and we need policies. So one channel is information sharing, as I mentioned earlier, and another is research funds for joint research. Actually, I'm happy to emphasize that we already have such a research fund by JSPS and DST of India. And the third one is we need to link foreign direct investment, FDI, to joint research. A good example is Suzuki, which has invested in India for a long time. So now Suzuki has many R&D centers in India conducting joint research. And finally, I want to emphasize the role of ODA. Actually, JICA's support to IIT Hyderabad has strengthened joint research with Japanese researchers, as shown by this figure. So overall, we need these policies to strengthen the India-Japan cooperation so that we can strengthen economic security together. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Todo. So I'd like to move on to Q&A sessions, but unfortunately, we may have just 3 to 4 minutes left. So are there anyone who do have any key question? No, not question, but say more like a policy comment. Clarification would be made bilaterally or later, but are there any significant comments for India-Japan cooperation as we have discussed? I may take 1 or 2 comments from the floor. I may not well look at anyone raising flags, hands, but if not, may I ask one question of my interest? I think today we are discussing about India-Japan cooperation. It may be very much comfortable to discuss cooperation measures, but I was very much interested to hear one key word at the beginning, that is rule-based trade policy making under WTO. So that's why, as a trade economist, if the speaker could comment a bit on my interest, I would be very much appreciate that. But okay, then I will give my floor to Dr. Latuna.
Yeah, Dr. Ratna, you can speak.
I'll give my floor to you. Yeah. Are you typing?
Or you can type, whatever feel appropriate.
Yeah, I can't. I don't leave to you a question here. Anyone could help me? You can type or talk directly, but
Okay, then he actually cannot unmute, so for technical reason, but you can type the questions quickly.
have you typed your comments? You say as follows, but I can't see following comments.
Yes, he has written it. Actually, maybe there is, Mr. Chair, Professor Kawasaki, there is let him type. In the meanwhile, there is a hand raised by another speaker. You can
Oh,
go
sorry,
to
I'm
him.
not seeing that. Who is raising hand?
Mr. Sujit, you can see him in the screen. He is the
I don't see
yeah.
actually, but please discuss your comments in considerations of time constraint or comments
Yes.
from is coming
Yeah.
in chat
So
box.
yeah, chat box. May I help you, Mr. Chair, to read it?
Yeah, it is actually my question as well. So both countries need to work on multilateral process, whether it is UN or WTO, rule-based policy making. Both countries have a lot of gain to its rule-based multilateral system. Can any speaker state what are the possibilities of cooperation or multilateral trade issues? That's actually my question. What Japan and India could do under WTO rule-based trading system, given the fact that India is out of RCEP?
So whom you would like to answer this between the two?
That may be briefly addressed to two speakers, if they have any idea on it. We are sorry, we are already behind the scheduling, but just briefly, I'd appreciate comments from two speakers on that point. Then we may
Yeah.
move on to the second panel.
Can I quickly answer?
Professor Todd, please.
Yeah, obviously, multilateral framework is also important, but at this moment, we need to balance the multilateral approach and bilateral approach. And the importance of balance was already mentioned by Professor Sharma at the very beginning of this webinar. And so practically, I think we need to emphasize more on the bilateral approach at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that brief, useful comments.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So with specific to supply chain resilience, since that is the key theme of today's webinar. So I think I can, on a priority basis, given that there is a recent disruptions in the supply chain and there are lot of concern on those issues. Maybe we can focus on those particular value chain products, parts and components where they can look into it and collaborate on a resilient to ensure there is a diversified supply chain for semiconductor, critical minerals, pharmaceuticals, and some of the key sectors where the intervention is very much required, where we can set the proper rule-based order collectively, both bilateral and multilateral level. And even there is also very much need of custom modernization and paperless trade. Of course, that is already in the process, but still for further integration for the regional and global value chain integration, that further needs to be strengthened for better efficiency. At least on a strategic or priority basis, some collective efforts can take by all the countries, that I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. My understanding is that we, Japan and India, may discuss our cooperation between two, but that should have some implication on global supply chain at much national level. That's the bottom line I do. Thanks for that for the speakers. And may I conclude this panel, our first panel, given we are already 5 minutes behind the scheduling. So may I propose move on to the panel 2 this moment?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Kawasaki, for sharing, and we thank you too, and also to the two speakers, Dr. Kumarasamy and Professor Todo, for their presentations. So let me now move on to the panel 2, which is on navigating global challenges and India-Japan cooperation. This session will be chaired by Commodore Sujit Samadar, RIS Visiting Fellow. So, and we have two speakers, Professor Urata Sensei, and myself. So the session will be, again, this is basically just 30 minutes, 30 35 minutes. So over to you, sir, Sujit Samadar, sir.
おはようございます。皆さん、このセッションにお越しいただきありがとうございます。よろしくお願いします。始めましょう。これから日本語が上手ない方ら、英語でお願いします。失礼します。So today's session has been very interesting, the first one. And this session is on looking at global challenges and India-Japan cooperation. So I think the fundamental point is that we have a special strategic and global partnership. So when the two countries spoke about special, global, and strategic partnership, it meant a lot. It was special because it was based on trust and mutual respect rather than just pure treaties and agreements. Secondly, it was strategic. That was not just limited to security or economy. It had a large number of subjects which made our relationship, our partnership strategic. Third word was global. And I think that is the one word which has seen the largest change in the 5 years or 6 years since COVID. Global means many, many things to many people. It can do with supply chains, as we spoke about. You can look at climate change. You can look at disasters and many of these things. Therefore, they are systemic and interconnected challenges that are across all sectors. So the question is, how can India and Japan cooperate? Not just how can they cooperate, but how can we jointly shape a more resilient global architecture for a more stable international order? And I'm not talking about pure security order. I'm also talking about an economic order, trade order, a technology order, because these are the changes that are happening very fast. First, let's quickly look at security and the rule-based Indo-Pacific. I don't have to speak too much on it because this is well known to us. East Asia is in some difficulty. West Asia is in some difficulty. closer home to India, there are some other difficulties. We have seen what's happening in Latin America. So there are lots of areas which have many problems. But at least between India and Japan, as the summit statement also said, we are both supporters of free and open India Pacific. We are collaborating for maritime awareness. There's a lot of emphasis on defense cooperation and interoperability. We are now about to conclude our first India-Japan, let's say, partnership in the Unicorn project. So here again, the key takeaways, as was said earlier, we have geography, we have market, we have reach, and Japan has technology investments and decades of experience in, in national engagement. Second, I think is very important, supply chain resilience and economic security that we just spoke about. I think the most important takeaway, and this is again from Japanese Toyota technology, which spoke about just-in-time manufacturing. Now we have to come to a situation which is just in case supply risk, which requires us to diversify our production networks, assembly mechanisms, our sources of critical materials, food grains, fertilizers. It has to be a just in case supply chain architecture. The third area, where again there is some amount of challenges that we are facing in terms of denial of technologies, in terms of denial of certain equipment. I think Japan has already witnessed to some sanctions by China in terms of rare earths and critical minerals, plus all the new technologies that we have yet to understand fully. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, space-based Earth observation systems, cyber, that's a very important our financial and digital infrastructure, all of these. So what has been our response between India and Japan? We have an innovation and skilled workforce on both sides. We can do some joint R&D, and we trust each other's digital ecosystem. So we have the fundamental framework in place. The fourth challenge is on energy transition and climate security. I think Japan has moved very rapidly on their energy transition. At least on the shipping industry, you already have looked at alternative fuels such as methanol, ammonia, and all these carbon-free fossil fuels. And of course, decarbonization is a common objective for both our two countries. Energy security through finding alternative means of sources of energy has been discussed, including biogas, which was discussed in the last summit. We're also looking at civil nuclear cooperation. I hope so that something works on it. That is the next thing. From a global thing, so I don't want to take up too much time. On the global thing, there are the strategic frontiers that we are using between. There is on critical minerals and rare earths, ocean-based ocean mining, which I don't support, and the Arctic. These are challenges that we have to look at, where the fundamental question that both our two countries have to answer is to what extent is freedom of the seas on one hand, and what extent is the common heritage of mankind in terms of open seas. So these are some things that we have to discuss and come to some conclusion. The last point, of course, is cost-cutting themes. Mention was made that India and Japan can work together not only between ourselves, but also creating a new sort of architecture with like-minded third countries for economic benefit, for strategic purposes, securing minerals and resources, food grains, and all of that. I think some negotiations on WTO were also mentioned. We have had some recent diplomatic momentum, and very clearly, India-Japan relations today is no longer simply about what two countries can achieve together. They're about how we can work together to make a more resilient, secure, and prosperous Indo-Pacific, given the global challenges that I have mentioned. So for the panel, we have two very eminent speakers, Professor Sensei and Dr. Kobe Tay. Just before we start, they've shared the presentation. Just three thoughts that I would leave with my panel to consider. The first question is, how can India and Japan move from strategic convergence to strategic co-production, particularly in semiconductors, critical minerals, defense technology, and clean energy? I will emphasize the word strategic co-production, addressing not only our individual markets, but also third country markets. Second question, as strategic competition extends into the deep ocean, Arctic, and other global commons, how can India and Japan become rule makers rather than rule takers? Very importantly, the recently concluded treaty on areas beyond national jurisdiction is a specific example where Japan and India can together work to at least make a pitch for locating the BBNJ Secretariat in the Global South. Third question is, how can we do trilateral and plurilateral cooperation with India's engagement with the Global South? We have Dr. Ratna here, who heads Dakshin, and so that we can create more resilient and trusted partnerships. So these are my initial thoughts. And with this, I now request I open the discussion. It is my great pleasure to welcome Professor Shujiro Murata Sensei from the Waseda University, where I had the opportunity to address some young people about 20 years ago when I was in Japan. So over to you, Murata Sensei. You have 10 minutes, please. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. And I like, let's see. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'd like to thank RIS, particularly Dr. Pradeep D and Dr. Sachin Kumar for organizing and hosting this very important webinar. And what I wanted to do is to share my slides, but I have difficulty finding, let's see, how to do it. If no, I see. Can somebody? Let's see.
Professor Urata,
Yes,
did you share the slides with us?
I am trying, but I sent you the slides. So if you can show the slides from your side, that'll
Yeah,
be
we can
very
show it
helpful.
to you. Can you mail it right now, or you can see there is a command. There's a button,
Yes,
in the
right.
bottom there is a share.
So that's what I'm pressing, but
Kumare-san, don't you have slide? Oh. Well, let me just go on. Well, I wanted to discuss, of course,
No, you have to first close it, that sharing thing. Otherwise,
okay,
our
right.
screen gets.
I closed it.
Yeah.
So, okay, I just wanted to begin by saying that, as the previous speakers mentioned, we are in a very challenging global environment. That's the first comment I just wanted to make, and then I go on to other points. In this increasingly complex environment that we are in, the importance of reliable partnership has grown significantly. Countries are looking for trusted partners that can contribute to stability and economic resilience and the maintenance of open and rules-based international system, as we heard from previous speakers. And in this context, I think India and Japan have increasingly important roles to play. The relationship between the two countries has evolved from a mainly economic partnership into a broader strategic partnership. The recent summit meeting between two prime ministers reaffirmed their shared view about the importance of this partnership on economic security, advanced technology, and clean energy, regional stability, and so on. Their discussions demonstrate that India and Japan are well positioned to work together in addressing both regional as well as global challenges as we heard from the previous speaker, the importance of not only bilateral or regional, but also global. And historically, India and Japan have maintained friendly relations based on mutual respect and economic cooperation. Japan has played an important role in India's development. Okay, thank you. I'm on the third page. If you can move on to the third page, that'll be very helpful. Right. Okay. Thank you. That's where I am. So Japan has contributed to India's economic development through infrastructure projects and investment and technical cooperation. However, in recent years, bilateral relationships have expanded significantly beyond traditional economic cooperation. Both countries increasingly share a common strategic vision, particularly regarding the importance of a free, open, and rules-based Indo-Pacific region, as previous speakers emphasized. This has led to deeper engagement in various regional frameworks, such as F4IP, Free and Open Indo-Pacific Initiative. The recent Leaders Summit further reinforced this strategic convergence. They agreed to launch a joint roadmap on economic security, expand cooperation in AI, semiconductors, critical minerals, and clean energy, and review the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, CEPA, to better reflect today's economic environment. Next page, please. Next page, please. Yes, thank you. Economic cooperation remains one of the most important pillars of the India-Pacific, India-Japan relationship. However, the nature of economic cooperation is changing. In the past, economic relations were often discussed mainly in terms of trade and investment. Today, economic security and supply chain resilience have become equally important. The global economy has experienced several shocks in recent years, including COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical conflicts. These events have demonstrated the risks of excessive dependence on a limited number of suppliers or production locations. In this environment, India and Japan have strong potential to cooperate in building more resilient and diversified supply chains. The two countries have complementary strengths. Japan has advanced technologies, strong manufacturing capabilities, capital resources, and experience in high quality infrastructure development. India, on the other hand, has a large and growing domestic market, a young workforce, expanding manufacturing capacity, and strategic location connecting different regions. By combining these strengths, India and Japan can create new opportunities in areas such as semiconductors, critical minerals, pharmaceuticals, digital industries, and advanced manufacturing. Next page, please. The Indo-Pacific region has become one of the most important areas for global economic and strategic development. The region is home to major trade routes, dynamic economies, and a large share of global economic activities. At the same time, it faces various challenges, including maritime security risks, geopolitical tensions, competition over regional influence. For India and Japan, maintaining regional stability is a common interest. The two countries have expanded cooperation in areas such as maritime security, defense dialogue, and infrastructure connectivity. Such cooperation does not mean forming exclusive alliances. Rather, it aims to support an open, inclusive, and stable regional order. Next page, please. Despite the importance and potential of bilateral cooperation, India and Japan face several challenges. First, although bilateral economic relations have grown, the level of trade and investment between the two countries does not fully reflect the potential of the two economies. Further efforts are needed to improve the business environment, enhance connectivity, and encourage greater private sector participation. Second, India and Japan have different economic structure and policy priorities. Japan has traditionally emphasized high standards, technological sophistication, and stable regulatory environment. India, meanwhile, has focused strongly on industrial development, employment creation, and economic transformation. Managing these differences through dialogue and cooperation will be important. The recent decision to review the CEPA provides an opportunity to address remaining barriers to trade and investment and to adapt the agreements to new and high level areas, such as digital trade and economic security. The last slide, please. Next one. Yes, next slide, please. Conclusions. These are, I'd like to talk about priority areas of future India-Japan cooperation. The last slide, next slide, please. Next slide. Can you go to next slide? Okay. Let me just go on. I have three priorities here. Right. First, the two countries should build on recent summit outcomes by strengthening cooperation in emerging technology, particularly AI, semiconductors, and so on. And second, they should accelerate cooperation on green transformation, renewable energy, and sustainable development. Third, they should work together to support reform of international institutions and preserve an open, rules-based global economy. India and Japan have already established important frameworks, as we heard today, including the CEPA, FYP, and most recently, a new roadmap for cooperation, economic security, and advanced technologies. The challenge now for India and Japan is to translate these initiatives into concrete outcomes. To this end, not only governments, but also private sector and think tanks such as RIS and RIETI should strengthen communication and policy dialogue and promote business partnerships, deepen mutual understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead. Thank you.
浦田先生、ありがとうございます。本当に面白い発表です。ありがとうございました。I think the key takeaway is, which we'll discuss subsequently, I think both our governments have done their job. They have set the framework. It is now up to us in the think tank and industry to do what you have said, to convert these initiatives to outcomes. So thank you again, Ratan Sensei. Wonderful presentation. I now turn to my colleague, Dr. Praveer Dey, PhD, and very well-known researcher. So, Dr. Dey, kindly make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think, can you see my slides? Yeah. Problem. Hello. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Let me try. Can you?
Yes, it's come now.
Okay, right. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for the introduction, and it's a great pleasure coming to the webinar, which is being organized. It's a very opportune moment. Just a few days back, we had Just a few days back, we had a very important state visit by Prime Minister Takichi, and in fact, all the presentations had mentioned, the outcome. So what I'm going to do for the next, I'll try to restrict myself on the time. What I'm going to do is take forward what Professor Urata, Dr. Kumarasamy, and Dr. Kawasaki, and the Professor Todo, they talked about how to strengthen India-Japan partnership for a secure, sustainable, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Well, as an economist, when you talk about Indo-Pacific, it is basically a geopolitical construct. We don't find much economics in it. But I will try to bring some economic dimensions, I feel appropriate. And these are purely my own views, nothing to do with RIS or the government offices. Some of our studies, what it indicates that the country, large economy, touching about 4 trillion market, GDP size, we have been facing differential impact of different type of global uncertainties. So today, India, Japan, and the countries in the Indian Ocean, they're facing a differential shocks. I underscore the word differential because Japan's implications on Japan certainly work differently than those implications, uncertain world order implications on India. So India is always in the very high medium impact zone compared to the less impact like Bhutan or some other countries might be. Now, what are the interactions, multiple crises since last pandemic? A couple of them I have added because of the time paucity. I am not going to repeat them. In short, the crises of different types, but they work in same directions, when they come together. So that's the point one. Second is that there are obligations from what the RISDG was talking in the morning, that look, if when you talk about resilient infrastructure, we also have to keep in mind the resiliency. It has a dispersals, like it varies between region, varies between the geography, varies between countries, but they should not behave as a kind of a trade barriers. Like, we know some of them I also added in some obligations like green shipping obligations of CBAM, etc., etc. So they behave as as a trade, not always a trade correction measures, but sometimes they behave as a trade barriers. Well, then over and above the war, several types of cybersecurity threat, energy threat, etc., sea level rise in their shipping crisis, India and Japan very much affected because of the change in arrangements in the in Suez. We had seen what happened in the last few weeks in the Hormuz, rising port congestions. When we require for a container at my port, container has been stuck somewhere in the sea. There is a rising charges, etc., etc. All these, in a different way, but together they are affecting the global supply chains, and there are rising business impacts, dampening particularly India's trade and growth. So as you might notice, a few weeks back, World Bank, their press forecast for India and other countries, they notched down 1 percentage point for India. So 7.6 percentage point that's India supposed to grow in 2006 and 7, they reduced it to 2.6, primarily because of the crisis in the Hormuz. So what I suggest here, and this is very common because this has been discussed extensively in today's webinar, is the current challenges require a collective efforts from both India and Japan for sustainable solutions, and some of them are already been reflected at a summit level meeting that we had on the 2nd of July. So to navigate the global uncertainties, my view is that, look, we have to, in 2006, we need to look at more as a bilateral and a regional cooperation and integration as an alternate best option, because multilaterally there are issues. Previous session chairman and Dr. Ratna actually tried to tell us what's the direction coming in the multilateral. This multilateral relations is not in a proper shape at the moment, and bilateral regional cooperation integration is another hope. Today, we talk about a friend-zoning, not just trade facilitation. We talk about supply chain realignment. That is what today's webinar. And then we talk about financial mechanism, green trade integrations. So these are the four verticals very much coming when you talk about bilateral regional cooperation integrations. So even in view of that, what's India-Japan relation at the moment, and where we would like to take it forward? So our relation is very much, rooted in a culture, rooted in civilization. We have a very strong, relation. It goes back history. India-Japan relations been elevated to special strategic and global partnerships based on domestic values, democratic values, trust and commitment. Somebody was telling me yesterday that India-Japan G2G relation is so strong, whereas if you come to Japan-China, whereas P2P relation is very strong, not the G2G. So here, government to government trust is very, very different than what we see in other contexts today. But there are issues in the economic front. The bilateral trade, even that's increased. I have, just simple arithmetic tells you basically India's exports is not growing, it's stagnated. And it is almost about 2% of India's world exports, even less now, is going to Japan. Our bilateral trade, we have a 27 billion, we have a deficit. There are reasons for the deficit. We also have a trade, we also have a capital account surplus. 45 billion roughly came to air. So maybe we need to look at in both ways, current account deficit, but capital account surplus. We need to look at both, if you need to judge. And there is an ambition to reach a yen 10 trillion Japanese FDI in India over the next decade, 2015 summit level meeting back in Tokyo. This was the ambition, 10 trillion. And while Japanese FDI is growing up, India's FDI is growing, but in Japan, but slowly, mostly in the IT and software. And there are promising outcomes of Japan's Prime Minister's Takichi's visit on the in the last week. But the point here to be noted is that India's exports to Japan is almost stagnated since we signed in SEPA, and upgrading SEPA, that's what we discussed, came out in the joint statement, might be a hope to us. So the contour, it moves from 6 areas: security and defense, to technology and innovation, people to people contact, supply chain resilience, climate and green growth, and then India-Japan economic cooperation. There are 4 or 5 areas where we have been cooperating. Now, where to go from here? If you look at the deficit in a number, in aggregate, it might be misleading. But if you look at this diagram, which we have collected from OEC, there are complementarities, and two pictures static. I won't be able to tell you it is rising or falling, but it's a complementarities. The trade point of view is there. But if you come down to the bottom where I have seen, there is India's rising trade surplus with Japan in 2025-26. So overall aggregate deficit, but if you go to the automobiles, India's total automobile export to the Japan is 12%. There is India's running surplus in automobiles. So that means this two diagram tells you very clearly the cars, that's India's exports to car, or where is it in imports is 1 billion export to the, quite a good number. So there is surplus, and here when I talk about automobile, it is automobile going to Japan is, which is basically is engine capacity is 1000 cc to less than 1600 cc. So automobile is the surplus, aircraft engine, there is a trade surplus, smartphone, there is a trade surplus, cotton trousers, which is in Tokyo, several stores, mostly for made in India, there's a trade surplus. So what I see, the 8-digit 2022 series, things are telling you a bit promising. So just this is what I see. So what are you required that if you need to carry forward this, if you need to strengthen enhanced connectivity, and the resilient supply chain. Very important, along with previous speakers which talked about. One example such is GVC, iPhone 17. There are parts and components flown into Bengaluru, Tamil Nadu, and this is what the markets, and that is why in the previous diagram tells you that there is a trade surplus of India's smartphone exports along with the United States of America to the Japan and many other places. Way forward, what we go from here. India is, as we have noticed, in getting into global products like Apple iPhone, and I think Japan, Korea, ASEAN, and Taiwan is this combination actually helps strengthen making such global products in semiconductors, electronics, renewable energy, logistics, footwear, textiles, and automotive. In disadvantage compared to others is a huge domestic market. So any investments coming, any global products are coming into smartphone, automobiles, industrial engineering, and other products, as Dr. Durairaj was talking about. There are dual benefits globally as well as a domestic one. To unlock such, and if I tell you in here along with others that we need to look at more about strategic utilization of the FDIs. If you leave out China, where India and Japan they have no FTA, but many other places we meet and also we follow each other's, like RCEP, CPTPP. We don't have, India didn't, but Japan has. Similarly, India has an FTA with many bilaterals. Japan doesn't. So I see this is kind of in a complementarities. And if we utilize those and in recent harmonization of the standards, particularly trade facilitation, opportunities are more in green technology, healthcare, startups, blue economy, and space. There are opportunities also in the trilateral cooperation, India, Japan, Africa, India, Japan, ASEAN, and the new investments opportunities in the West Bengal state and the northeastern part of India. Two recommendations that I have. As you have noticed that India is now coming up with a single interface for all single windows for the cross-border clearances using artificial and machine learning, and with the joint statement with the artificial India, Japan, there are lots India, Japan together can do in the logistics and supply chain areas. For example, one such is exchanging of e-bill of lading between the two countries using the tech companies in Japanese and in Singapore. And second one, and second one is, we strategic trade and investment linked using, investments by more Japanese economic zones. I also said that let's have also more direct flights and expanding the shipping networks. To conclude, India, Japan together can contribute to a stable, resilient, and sustainable Indo-Pacific. And I identify 5 recommendations. Also underline who will be doing what. Like, if you are looking for an India-Japan maritime partnerships, focusing on multimodal connectivity and security, shipping, and supply chain, Japanese Foreign Office and Indian Foreign Office, they need to work together. If you are looking for a more, Japanese shipping lines to call each other, shipping companies, private sector, for example, Mitsui Uesugi. If you're talking about port-to-port cooperation, Japan and Singapore, they already have a sustainable green shipping. Similarly, Singapore and India have a project green shipping. So we need to connect each other, like Chennai and Nagoya, extending India-Singapore green digital shipping to the Japan. This is a doable project. And there are many others in the customs cooperation. And of course, the last one is role of diplomacy in when we talk about exploring joint initiative in RT and Northern Zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Day. That was a very fascinating presentation with lots of data. I'm sure our participants have greatly benefited from your observations. Clearly, 2 or 3 things. One is I'm very intrigued to see that we are importing $500 million worth of gold and about $1.292 billion of refined copper from Japan. So I think that is one area where we should target to see how we can build up national capacity together with Japan and India. But I'll reserve my rest of my comments and questions. First, let me request my participants if they have any questions. Please pose them now.
Also, to add here that we actually overshoot our time, and
Yes.
given by the Japanese way of engaging with the opener, we have to follow. Maybe
I think
5
minute.
to 6 minutes time. There is a questions in the chat box. I think Professor
Yes.
Urata Sensei can answer to it, sir, if with your permission.
Yes. You have a question from India has joined the RCA.
The question is, I think, about India's possible kind of participation in RCEP. Isn't that the question that I saw?
No,
If
there are
that's the
multiple.
case,
No, there are multiple questions. First question is that
okay.
India joining RCEP. Second is India's GDP is going to overtake Japanese GDP next year. And there is another question is to keep the rule-based trade system in East Asia. Does it seem desirable that India, China, and Japan to develop same trade rule? So yeah, there are a couple of
Sorry,
questions, but freely you can answer whatever you want to.
maybe the first question on India's and RCEP is maybe Professor D. You could respond to this first question. No, is that the possibility of
Right, I can
returning to
answer,
the?
sir. You give your comments if you have any observations.
Oh, I'd like to see India come back to RCEP, but as we know, one of the difficulties for India to accept RCEP is because its trade deficit with China, and that still continues to be the obstacle. And considering that, this, I think India should think about joining CPTPP because China is not in CPTPP. And I'd like to see your views on this possibility of India joining CPTPP.
Well,
Professor
sir,
D?
briefly, I have three quick observations because it's time we are already, overstood our time. One is that, if you recall the simulations done by your colleague, chair of the previous session, Dr. Kawasaki, and he said that if India comes back to the RCEP, India's GDP will rise by 3.1 percentage point. At the same time, he said that if India's join might, Japan's GDP will go down marginally by 0.1%. And he said that if it is, then India's coming back of RCEP doesn't coming back to the RCEP as a sense. So I would like to say that there is an alternate way to look at it, as you said, the CPTPP, and there has been discussion in different corners that CPTPP might be an opportunity for India. I may not. I'm not a trade negotiator, so I won't able to give answer to it. But if I may apply to his second questions, reply to his second questions, which is basically India, China, and Japan, the trade rules. Of course, three countries are partners. Three countries are members of WTO, and they are bound by WTO multilateral rules. Even though one big nation, they do not follow the multilateral trade rules. So our multilateral trade rules, we are very much abide to. But if there are any violations, because of some reasons or others, we need to consult each other and actually follow, maintain, and respect the multilateral trade rules. So that would be, my big generalistic response to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have had a very interesting discussion. Just three takeaways from the discussion that we have had. One is, of course, is just in time to just in case. We spoke about strategic resilience, but at the cost of efficiency on economic security is going to become a matter of concern. The other point that came up was on the whole business about bilateral to network partnerships. All my participants spoke about it. And the most important thing is that how can India and Japan not just face up to challenges, but work together to work around those challenges. With these three thoughts, I'd like to conclude this session. My grateful thanks to my two very eminent panelists, and I really thank you very much for your very, very significant and very, very interesting contributions to this webinar. Thank you very much. Over to Dr. Day to conclude today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Commander Samandar sir, for brilliant chairing of the session. We have come to the closing session. I request Professor Urata sir to your closing remarks, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. D. Yes, distinguished speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude today's conference, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation, gratitude to all our speakers and discussants and participants and organizers for valuable contribution and engaging discussions. I learned a lot from today's discussions, particularly how India is looking at Japan, and more, I guess, specifically, I was very much impressed by Professor D's presentation about the detailed kind of, very specific discussions on specific projects and so on. And one message that I think I obtained from the today's discussion is that this economic security versus economic growth or economic efficiency. And, we tend to think these two as a kind of trade-off relationship, but we have to satisfy, or we have to meet these two objectives simultaneously or jointly. So resilience should not come at the expense of openness. That's what one, I think, very important message that I think I learned from this discussion. And as a matter of fact, resilient supply chains are very important to promote economic growth. And economic growth is a very important factor to build resilient supply chains. So in that sense, these two objectives can be achieved jointly. And this is one thing we should, I think, remember. And in order to achieve these two objectives, having a very reliable, respectable, rules-based, open trade and investment environment is very important. And at the moment, as we as we heard today, multilateral rules are not really functioning very well. And so the question is what we should do. One is to get together with like-minded countries and to form like FTA or say try to set up so-called plurilateral trade agreements like in digital trade and so on. And I think India and Japan should look to these two venues, and we already have established FTA, and we can of course deepen this FTA. And another is I'd like to see India joining some plurilateral agreements. And so far, if I remember correctly, or if I'm not mistaken, India has not maybe joined some of the plurilateral trade agreements. So this is something I'd like to see happen in the future. Having all said this, we, I think, agree that the continued cooperation between India and Japan in various areas such as trade and investment, infrastructure development, digital trade, connectivity, innovation, and particularly human resource development. Although we didn't have time to discuss this today, I think, cooperation in human resource development is very important. And indeed, as I was teaching at university before retirement, I found very few Indian students at Japanese universities. I'd like to see more Indian students studying Japan and to learn about Japan, hopefully to stay in Japan, and so that they can be a very important bridge between these two countries. With this, I'd like to end my concluding remarks, and before I do that, I really hope that the exchange between R&S and reality will continue. I'm sure it will continue, and it will contribute to the formulation of appropriate policies between India and Japan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Namaskar and Professor Urata Sensei, sir, for your very motivating closing remarks. I like to add a few points before we close. I thank, first of all, the Riyati for coming forward and joining with RIS for this very important webinar. And this is done soon after the visit of Prime Minister Takeichi and very important summit outcomes on the 2nd of July. I'd like to thank Professor Urata and all his RIATI colleagues and also our ISDG and our colleagues who have worked with us in making this webinar a very successful one. I have no closing remarks or kind of takeaways of the webinar, but we wanted to discuss more about supply chain realignment in view of global uncertain world orders or global uncertainties of different types. The first two remarks by Professor Sachin Kumar Sharma and Professor Fukao, both of them underscored the need for cooperation between the countries, also the multilateral cooperations. And and thereafter we had two panels, and very rightly they discussed the first panel on the global uncertainties and realignment of the supply chains, and interesting presentations by both the speakers, Dr. Durai Raj and Professor Todo, and excellent chairing by Dr. Kawasaki, whom we met back in Tokyo in person at the Indian Embassy. And there was a Q&A questions and session came from the audience. So there is an engagement with our, sharing our narratives, sharing our presentations with the audience that happened. And of course, the panel two, going deeper on the sectoral or on subjects of India, Japan. Professor Urata, talking about FTAs, India's getting into a plurilateral FTAs or several other. He underscored the need for importance of digital cooperation, people to people, human resource development, etc. And in my presentations, I wanted to talk more about India Japan and the point of Indo Japan cooperation in the areas of supply chain and the connectivity, with particular focus on the maritime cooperation, identifying some projects. So we will be coming out some summary or outcome document of this webinar, which will be shared with you and with the stakeholders and other those who are watching audience. And to conclude, I thank to Professor Urata, the chairman of our RIATI, Professor Fukao, and all the speakers and all the participants who have joined, from Japan and from India. We have a good number of attendees and participants who listen to us, and we will be sharing the PowerPoints. We will be sharing with all of you our presentations material and summary of the discussions. Kindly keep in touch, and thank you, Akiko-san and Adrija from my team, and Dr. Srinivas Rao from RIS and RIS administration, particularly Sushma Bhatt and Mr. Rawat and many others who have worked very closely in this connecting the audience through this digital mode. So with that, we close. It is 11:48 in Delhi, and it is one almost about
3:20
in Japan time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to see you again. And
Yes.
we have some more editions of the webinar. We won't
Yes.
just stop here. We
Right.
will continue our dialogue in detail.
Yes, please.
Please take care of yourself, be in good
Okay.
health, and
Thank
thank you
you.
very
You
much.
too.
Bye
Right.
bye.
Thank you.
So we are closing our
All right.
webinar now. Thank you. Thank you, TGRIS, for joining. Thank you.